Welcome to Beyond the Evidence, the podcast where the shadows of doubt meet the light of truth. I'm Stacy, and he's Adam. Together, we'll journey into the heart of real-life mysteries, peeling back the layers of fact and fiction to uncover what truly lies beyond the evidence. Each week, we dive into cases that will make you question everything you thought you knew, from unsolved disappearances to chilling true crimes, and even perplexing phenomena that defy explanation. With that said, let's jump into today's episode.
Welcome to another deep dive, this time into a story that feels like it's straight out of a true crime thriller.
Oh, yeah.
It's got it all: forbidden love, manipulation, and murder.
All the good stuff.
We're going to be unraveling the chilling case of Pamela Smart.
Now, that's a name that brings back memories.
It's a case that captivated the nation back in the early 90s.
I remember it well.
What's so fascinating about this case is how ordinary it seems at first.
Yeah, you've got Pamela Smart, a young, attractive high school media director.
Seemed to be happily married, too.
Right, from all outward appearances, the perfect life.
But that perfect image was just a facade.
A facade covering a secret that would soon become a national sensation.
Pamela was having an affair.
Uh-oh.
And not just any affair.
Yeah, I was about to say there are affairs and then there are affairs.
Her lover was a 15-year-old student.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, that's a big one.
A 15-year-old student named Billy Flynn.
I think I vaguely remember hearing about that.
This forbidden romance set the stage for a tragedy that would change the lives of everyone involved.
I can only imagine.
But the question that has haunted this case for decades is, was Pamela Smart just a woman who made some bad choices?
Right.
Or was she a master manipulator
Using this young man to get what she wanted.
who used her relationship with Billy Flynn to orchestrate something far more sinister?
That's the question, isn't it?
To get to the bottom of that, we need to go back to the events that led up to the crime.
Okay, so back to the beginning.
Our sources suggest that Pamela was unhappy in her marriage.
That's not uncommon, unfortunately, but it usually doesn't lead to murder.
Right, so was that unhappiness enough to drive her to murder?
That's what we're going to try to figure out.
The sources paint a very chilling picture of what happened next.
Okay, lay it on me.
Pamela allegedly began to manipulate Billy,
Okay.
playing on his emotions, his insecurities.
It's awful.
She confided in him about her marital problems,
Trying to get his sympathy, I imagine.
creating a sense of intimacy and trust.
Yeah.
Classic grooming behavior.
And here's where the story takes a very dark turn.
Oh boy.
According to the sources, Pamela started suggesting to Billy that the only way they could be together was if her husband was out of the picture.
You're kidding.
I wish I was.
A high school media director suggesting to a student that her husband needed to disappear.
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
The plan, as it was laid out, was chilling in its simplicity.
Okay, what was it?
Billy, along with two of his friends, would wait for Gregg to come home from work.
Okay.
They would stage a break-in, make it look like a robbery gone wrong.
So Gregg would walk into his home totally unaware of what was about to happen.
That's right. That's terrifying.
On that night, Gregg Smart walked into his home and was confronted by the teenagers.
One of whom was armed, I'm assuming.
One of them had a .38 caliber handgun.
Oh, my God.
The sources describe a truly awful scene.
I can't even imagine.
Gregg Smart pleaded for his life. He even got down on his knees.
But they still went through with it.
They did.
This poor man.
Billy Flynn, the love-struck teenager, pulled the trigger.
Wow.
A single gunshot in a quiet suburban condo shattered the illusion of normalcy.
And plunged everyone involved into a nightmare.
A nightmare they would never wake up from.
It's hard to believe that really happened.
I know it's a lot to take in.
It is.
And as the police began their investigation, Pamela maintained a facade of grief.
So she was playing the grieving widow.
She was putting on quite a performance for everyone.
But the police weren't buying it.
No, they weren't. They started to notice inconsistencies in her story.
Like what?
Little details that didn't quite add up.
Oh, I see.
Witnesses reported seeing Pamela and Billy together in the days leading up to the murder.
So the rumors about an affair started to swirl.
Exactly. People started talking and the police started listening.
Makes sense.
And then came a bombshell.
Oh, what happened?
One of the teenagers involved, Cecilia Pierce, agreed to cooperate with the police.
Oh, wow. So she flipped on them.
She wore a wire and captured a conversation with Pamela that would change everything.
That must have been a game changer.
It was in that recording. Pamela can be heard coaching Cecilia on what to tell the police.
Oh, wow. So they had her dead to rights.
That's one way to put it.
So what happened next?
Within months, arrests were made.
Starting with Pamela, I imagine?
Billy Flynn, Patrick, Randall Vance, Latime Jr.
And of course, the alleged mastermind behind it all, Pamela Smart.
And of course, Pamela.
This case must have been huge in the news.
It was a media sensation, one of the first trials to be televised gavel to gavel.
Wow, that's incredible.
The young, attractive teacher accused of manipulating a teenage boy to murder her husband.
It's like something out of a movie.
It actually was made into a movie.
Oh, really? What was it called?
To Die For.
I'll have to check that out.
It's a pretty good movie.
I bet.
The trial, just like the crime itself, was full of drama, twists, and turns.
I bet it was.
You had the testimony of the teenagers, Pamela's emotional outbursts, the legal maneuvering.
And it must have been a spectacle.
It was. And the jury's verdict was swift and decisive.
What was the verdict?
Billy Flynn, who admitted to pulling the trigger, along with his accomplices, Patrick Randall and Vance Latime Jr., were all found guilty.
So they were all going to jail.
And what about Pamela?
Yeah, what was her fate?
Pamela Smart, the woman the prosecution painted as a manipulative seductress who used her charms to orchestrate a cold-blooded murder.
Don't keep me in suspense.
She too was found guilty,
Wow.
sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
That's a tough sentence.
It is, but even behind bars, Pamela Smart has always maintained her innocence.
Really? She still says she didn't do it.
She claims that while she made mistakes, she never wanted her husband dead.
So what do you believe?
Do you think he was a cold, calculating killer or a victim of circumstance?
It's a tough one, isn't it?
It really is.
I guess that's what we're here to figure out.
That's what we're going to try to do. It's a question that continues to fascinate and divide people to this day.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that really gets under your skin.
It really does. The sources we have, they offer a glimpse into the complexities of this whole thing.
But they also leave us with more questions than answers.
So many questions.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. And one of the things that really stands out is how this case impacted not just the people directly involved.
Right. It wasn't just about Pamela and Billy and Gregg.
It was a societal earthquake, this whole thing.
It really was. It forced people to confront some uncomfortable truths about power and betrayal.
And about the vulnerabilities of young people.
Especially in situations like this with these power dynamics at play.
It's like looking into the abyss of human nature.
And sometimes what you see isn't pretty.
The sources highlight the deep emotional toll on everyone involved.
You can only imagine what the families went through.
It's hard to fathom the grief, the anger, the confusion.
The families of both Gregg and Pamela, their lives were shattered.
Just shattered, ripped apart.
And what about the community of Derry, New Hampshire?
This small town thrust into the national spotlight.
Dealing with a crime that seemed too horrific to be real?
It's a reminder that darkness can touch even the most idyllic places.
It really can. You never know what's happening behind closed doors.
Never. And you mentioned the teenagers who were convicted alongside Pamela.
Right. Billy Flynn, Patrick Randall, Vance Latime Jr.
What became of them?
Well, their sentences were all over the place.
Reflecting their different roles in the crime, I suppose?
Exactly. Billy Flynn, the one who pulled the trigger, got 28 years to life.
28 years to life.
Patrick Randall, who helped restrain Gregg, got 40 years to life.
40 years?
Although that was later reduced.
Oh, so he got some time off.
And Vance Latime Jr., the getaway driver, got 18 years to life.
18 years.
These were young men, barely adults, facing decades behind bars.
For a crime they committed at the behest of their teacher.
It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. It raises so many questions about accountability and manipulation.
And the lasting impact of bad decisions made when you're young.
One of the most controversial aspects of this whole thing was the prosecution's use of plea deals.
Right. The teenagers got reduced sentences in exchange for their testimony against Pamela.
It's a common legal tactic. But in this case,
it really added fuel to the fire.
Did those plea deals compromise the integrity of the trial?
That's a good question.
Did they influence the jury's perception of Pamela's guilt?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely makes you wonder.
It does. And then there's the media frenzy.
Oh, yeah. This was the early 90s, the dawn of 24/7 cable news.
This was the era of court TV.
Right. Every twist and turn, every emotional outburst broadcast into homes across the country.
It was a spectacle.
It was, and it raised questions about whether Pamela could even get a fair trial with the entire nation watching.
Did that intense media coverage influence the outcome?
It's possible.
It's hard to say, but it's something to consider.
Definitely.
The Pamela Smart case wasn't just a crime story. It was a cultural phenomenon.
It inspired books, movies, countless documentaries.
And at the heart of it all is the question that still lingers to this day.
Was she a manipulative mastermind or a victim of circumstance?
Was Pamela Smart a cold, calculating killer? Or was she, as she claims, a victim of her own bad choices?
It's a question that may never be fully answered.
And decades later, Pamela Smart is still behind bars.
Still proclaiming her innocence.
She's filed numerous appeals challenging the evidence, the media coverage, everything.
But overturning a jury's verdict, that's a long shot.
It's a long and arduous journey, and there's no guarantee of success.
And that's the reality of our legal system sometimes.
It's amazing how this case, even after all this time, still gets people talking.
Yeah, it really grabs you, doesn't it?
It does. The sources we've looked at, they offer a lot of information.
But they also show how hard it is to separate fact from fiction.
It's like trying to untangle a really complicated knot.
Exactly. And that's what makes the Pamela Smart case so compelling.
You're drawn in and you just can't look away.
It forces you to confront your own biases.
Do you see her as a manipulative seductress?
Or a flawed individual who made terrible choices?
A cold-blooded killer or a victim of circumstance?
It's not an easy question to answer.
It really isn't. And the sources also touch on something interesting.
What's that?
Our fascination with true crime. Why are we so drawn to these stories?
I've wondered that myself.
What is it about these dark tales of betrayal and violence that captures our imaginations?
Maybe it's the desire to understand the darker side of human nature.
To peer into the abyss and try to make sense of the senseless.
Or maybe it's the thrill of the puzzle, trying to figure out a crime that may never be fully solved.
The Pamela Smart case has all of that.
Mystery, intrigue, a cast of characters that seems straight out of Hollywood.
But it's important to remember, this isn't just a story.
Right? This is real life with real consequences.
Lives were shattered, families torn apart.
A community forever scarred by this tragedy.
And while we may never know for sure what really happened that night,
we can still learn from it.
We can use this case to examine our own values, our own judgments,
and our own understanding of justice.
The sources we've explored offer a glimpse into the legal system. The media's influence the complexities of human relationships.
But we're still left with that lingering sense of unease.
Like something's not quite resolved.
The truth can be elusive, and justice isn't always black and white.
What's so fascinating is how this case continues to resonate even now.
It speaks to our fascination with true crime, our anxieties about betrayal and manipulation,
and the dark potential that can lurk within seemingly ordinary people. The Pamela Smart case is a cautionary tale.
A reminder that actions have consequences and choices once made can echo through time.
It challenges us to think critically, to question assumptions.
And to recognize that even in the simplest stories, there are always layers of complexity.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with one final thought.
What's that?
The Pamela Smart case is more than just a crime story.
It's a mirror reflecting our own societal fears and fascinations.
And as we continue to grapple with its legacy, maybe we can learn something about ourselves.
About the choices we make and the power of stories that refuse to let go.
Thanks for joining